All right, Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph 101a. We're going to back up a little bit to the Tanur Rabbanon, the first one, which is, if you go to the narrow set of lines and you count up on the left side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines up, third to last word, Tanur Rabbanon Sachin. The first line of the word is Omar Afilu Vayikra El Moshe, and then Tanur Rabbanon. It's
I got it.
You got it?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That one. Yeah.
It's up here.
Up here.
Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
There you go.
Tanur Rabbanon. So we're backing up a little bit. We're discussing appropriate medicinal activity on Shabbos, and we're doing this specifically because related to the idea of using incantations as spiritual method of healing, and when and how that's allowed. So in that context, some halachas come up with regard to doing that on Shabbos, because as mentioned yesterday, on Shabbos in and of itself, the general rule is one is not allowed to engage in medicinal activity because it was associated with grinding herbs, unless under certain circumstances it's permissible. Again, it's a case-by-case basis, and consult your local Orthodox rabbi. But here's the text. Tanur Rabbanan, where our sages taught, Sachin, one can smear, Memash machine, one can massage b'nei ma'ayim, their stomach, b'Shabbos on Shabbos. Because, we're going to give a caveat later, but smearing oil it's more like drinking than it is like ordinary medicinal activity, and it therefore does not qualify to make it forbidden for medicinal activity. It has the issue of memarech, which is smearing in general is a problem, which we'll get to later. But in terms of the issue of healing, massaging one's stomach and rubbing it with oil doesn't constitute as medicinal activity. Although there are other issues, and we'll talk about that shortly. And likewise, one can whisper incantations to prevent snake or scorpion from touching him on Shabbos or from harming him on Shabbos, and it does not violate the prohibition of trapping. You can't put a trap out to trap an animal.
Interesting. The Rambam holds this way. Rambam doesn't believe in these things, so that's the Rambam explains it. Even though it doesn't have any effect, it makes the person feel better. It's allowed.
He talks about it in psychological terms, yeah. Placebo effect.
Placebo, exactly.
But that's the das yachid there. At any rate,
the Shulchan quotes him. The same quotes the Mechaber quotes him.
Not for this, for other things.
No, it's Kizlach.
No, meaning
even though it won't help.
If a person does a lachisha, he's not sure it's going to work.
Yeah.
Meaning not a blanket statement that all lachishas don't work.
He said, even though they in a moil.
Even if it doesn't work, meaning there's some lachishas that could work, some lachishas that don't work. But the Rambam is of the view that none of these things work.
Yeah, exactly.
In that sense, he's the das yachid. But the Rambam is a das yachid is more weighty than most people as a Rambam. But anyway, okay. So this is the halacha saying that a person who whispers incantations to try to prevent snakes and scorpions from biting him on Shabbos does not violate the prohibition of trapping, even though through his words he's ostensibly preventing or holding these animals back from touching him. Likewise, mavirin kli al gava ayin, one can place a metal vessel on their eye. As mentioned yesterday, Rashi gives two options. One is that he's putting a cold vessel to cool down if it's swelling and he wants to cool it down, so he puts a cold metal utensil or vessel. Or there's another thing where a person puts a ring around his eye. I don't know what that is. But one can do that on Shabbos, again, because it's not associated with eating or grinding, which is the underpinning prohibition of medicinal practice on Shabbos. And therefore, putting this piece of metal on the eye is permissible. In the same way, massaging one's stomach is permissible. But Amar says, under what circumstances is one allowed to put that vessel on their eye? But kliya nittel, if they kliya a vessel that's anyways allowed to be moved on Shabbos. But a vessel that's not allowed to be moved on Shabbos because it's what's known as muktzah, also it's forbidden. So just a little word about muktzah so we understand what this is. People make the mistake of thinking that the primary issue of muktzah is that you may do a prohibition with it. Like, don't touch electricity because you might turn it on. That is one element of muktzah, but it's not the primary. The primary idea of muktzah is whether or not the thing you are touching is useful to you on Shabbos. And the question becomes, to what degree is it useful, and to what degree is it not useful? So, for example, the famous the Gemara's example of like an extreme case of muktzah is yeset shemachrisha, which is like a huge, like a, I think it's not a sieve, it's like a huge, like round blade that they used to use to cut grass. Like when you swing it on your knee and you cut grass, or if you ever go to like Old Montreal, not Old Montreal, Upper Canada Village, they show it to you.
It's a scythe.
That's the word. It's this big
SCYTHE. Scythe.
Scythe, that's what it is. It's a big, massive blade that they used to cut grass. So that's the kind of blade that on Shabbos you have absolutely no use for, because you couldn't cut your chicken with it, right? So that's like a very high level of muktzah.
Because that's called malakal yisr normally.
That's correct, malakal yisr. But then there's
keys and so on.
There's other things.
Yeah.
So there's different levels of muktzah depending on what's the use you would get out of that item, and to what degree therefore becomes muktzah. So, for example, a plate that hangs on your wall as a decoration is also a very high level of muktzah, because you have absolutely no use for it on Shabbos. And more importantly, at the moment Shabbos started, it was nowhere in your mind that you would ever come to use that on Shabbos, right? Whereas, for example, a phone, even though you were hoping never to use it on Shabbos, but if I were to ask you at the moment Shabbos started, if there's an emergency or you can take your phone, the answer is yes. So which means, even at the moment the Shabbos began, the word muktzah means set aside. But because at the moment of Shabbos that phone wasn't completely set aside, because if God forbid the circumstances were you need to call an ambulance, you would use your phone, which means it's less muktzah, and you'd be allowed to or have to, which means that the phone is less muktzah than that decorative plate on your wall, and less muktzah than the scythe, whatever it's called, right? Which would mean, for example, if you needed the place, okay, tzarech makom is almost always muktzah, but certainly if you need the place where the phone was, you can move the phone away to use the place where the phone is. And once you're moving it, you can put it into your drawer, for example. And that's the general principle with muktzah. So here the Gemara is saying that when you're using a spoon, or using a piece of metal to put it on your eye, use a kind of thing which you would anyways be allowed to move on Shabbos. It's not muktzah, like an ordinary tablespoon, which is not muktzah because you would have use for it on Shabbos. Which also leads to the fact that there are those who are stringent. This is the proper way of doing it, is that when you don't need the spoon, you should treat it as muktzah because you don't need it. Not to fiddle with it because you don't need it. Don't move it. Which is a level. At any rate. Okay, further stated, with respect to incantations on Shabbos, says the Gemara, says this Mishnaic H text, Ve'ein shoylim b'davar b'dvar shedim. One cannot communicate and ask shedim, ask demons. The word God slipped me. Demons. Yes. 1 second. Now the Gemara is talking about Shabbos. Why? It's talking about right now. It's talking about Shabbos, because Shabbos one is not allowed to communicate with demons. Why? Because the prophets wrote that on Shabbos one should rest, which means like this: the prohibitions, biblically speaking, from the 5 books of Moshe from Torah is not to do any of the 39 works. That's out. The prophets added, in Yeshaya it's there, that a person should not speak about items that are not Shabbosdik, or speak about prohibitions. Talk about a business deal they're going to do, or talk about something related to something which is forbidden on Shabbos, which is something that people should be aware of. This is to heighten our sensitivity to Shabbos, that we don't just rest in the actions, but rest in our minds also, and in the way we speak.
So if you're planning, there's a million examples, I know, but so if you're planning renovations in your house, you really shouldn't talk about that on Shabbos, right? Because it has to do with building.
That's correct.
Right. Typical example.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct. That's correct. The Gemara tells us that a person should view their Shabbos that kol malachtecha asuya. All my work is done. When it comes to Shabbos, I'm in a different world. I don't think about my work. I don't talk about my work. I'm living in Shabbos mode. And the prophets canonized that as an actual law. It's a whole set of laws in Shulchan Aruch about what you're allowed to speak about and how you're allowed to speak and when you're allowed to speak. So it says the text that a person cannot speak to a demon on Shabbos asking, hey, Rashi's example is, I lost my wallet, can you tell me where it is? Asking a demon. Apparently they're able to do this. Ask a demon, could communicate with some spiritual force, and that spiritual force would inform them of information that they couldn't get through the physical channels. So says the halacha.
He probably took it.
Maybe. So it says the halacha, says the Mishnah here, you can't do that on Shabbos because you're talking about you're talking about weekday matters. You're talking to a shade, even if you're not going to go get it on Shabbos. But the fact that you're talking to it on Shabbos is already a prohibition. Says Rabbi Yossi Omer, apachel aser. Even during the week, it's forbidden to talk to demons. So even if you had the capacity to communicate with these spiritual forces, don't do it. Why? End Mishnayik H text. Amar Rav Huna says, Ein halacha Rabbi Yossi. The halacha does not follow Rabbi Yossi, which means you're allowed to communicate with demons during the week if you want to.
But some change, some
1 second. There's different versions where it says it shouldn't halacha or shouldn't. That you shouldn't talk to them on Shabbos during the week. You should not. That there's in the parentheses it says you should not. Or in the parentheses it says the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi. So either you read it, the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, or you read it, the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi. The halacha is, at the end of the day, is like Rabbi Yossi, is like Rabbi Yossi, and we do not communicate with demons even during the week. Why? The Af Rabbi Yossi loy amara. Rabbi Yossi indeed only said this, not because of a real concern for any violation of any Torah law. When it comes to the issue of Shabbos, there's a violation of prophetic law, at least, not from biblical, but from the prophets, that one should not speak about weekday matters on Shabbos, and communicating to demons is talking about weekday stuff. But when it comes to the weekday, you don't have that issue. So what is the problem? Why is Rabbi Yossi forbidding it? And why is the halacha follow him? El mishum sakana, because of a sakana. It's dangerous. It's dangerous to communicate with spiritual forces. You live a physical world, behave in a physical manner. That's where your dominion is. You don't live in the spiritual world, and therefore you don't have proper, at least most people, do not have the proper tools and means to navigate the spiritual world to protect themselves against whatever spiritual elements might attack them. And therefore, don't do that. Don't communicate with the world outside of your own purview. Which is interesting. I believe I mentioned this once before, that Rashi is of the view that some of the prohibited behaviors talked about in the Torah, like communicating with the dead and communicating with different spiritual forces, some say that they have no powers, and that's why the Torah says don't touch it. And others say they do have powers, but we don't care about them in terms of talking about trying to predict the future. Rashi seems to imply that they are capable of predicting the future, but you have faith in Hashem. So it's a kind of similar thing here. The Gemara is not denying that the communication with these demons, or at least that's what it seems, notwithstanding the Rambam's view, but it seems from the Gemara's straight translation that it's accepting the fact that communicating with these spiritual forces, these demons, as you call them, have truth to them, have validity. It means you've asked them, you would get real information. The problem is that you don't have full control over that world, and therefore don't go there, because you might get hurt. The story of Rabbi Yitzchak, son of Yosef. Now, Rabbi Yitzchak, son of Yosef, is a person who the Gemara says Rav, which means he had certainly more spiritual power than I do. And he too got hurt, as the Gemara says. Because what happened was, the evil of Ba'arza, he got swallowed up. He was communicating with a demon. And there's two different ways to understand the story. We'll give you Rashi's way.
Which language he speaks? Yiddish or Hebrew?
Who?
The demon.
I have no idea.
Probably Hebrew, because we know he spoke with Shlomo.
I have no idea.
Yeah, they're spiritual.
Doesn't say.
But they probably spoke Hebrew.
I don't think any physical language you and I know are going to help us.
No, we're not.
It has to do with...
We'll do that after. The whole Shulchan Aruch is about this discussion.
Whether the language you're using is secondary to the fact that you have whether you have the spiritual capacity to engage with these people. At any rate, so Mitzvah Yosef was communicating with a shade, with a demon.
Yeah.
There's two different ways to read this Gemara. We'll do Rashi's way, which is the shade.
Yeah, that's more bracha, so you attract them.
Yeah.
I guess it depends what kind of shade them. Okay. Anyway. Yeah, the Zohar talks about Jewish shade, not Jewish shade them, and the Alter Rebbe connects that to the Yetzer Hara, but anyway.
Yeah, that's the idea, the Yetzer Hara, the shade.
Yeah, we talked about this once before.
The Gemara says the Malach HaMavis and the Satan and
it's all the same.
The Yetzer Hara is all one and the same thing.
Yeah.
It's all the different manifestations.
It's just a question of, it's a question of what,
and spirituality.
yeah, it's a question of to what degree is our physical life in sync and align with spiritual realities. So I don't like the word demons because it conjures up Christian images of what demons look like. Some guy with horns and things. It's not like that. It's a spiritual force.
Force from the Sitra.
Even a better way of saying spiritual force, because even when you imagine spiritual, people think of like wishing, let's call it metaphysical, meaning that which you cannot touch and see. Just call it that. Anyway.
There's this concept of a dibuk also.
Dibuk is a similar thing, but dibuk is connected to an neshama.
Yeah.
but it's a similar thing. In other words, like a
Neshama
neshama and a malach live, as it were, in the same world. At least they could be living in the same world, right? In the terms of what spiritual plane they're on. So in that sense, they're both metaphysical. But one's a neshama, one's created. It's different. It's like,
more you talked about how the shadim are compared to people, compared to malachim. They reproduce and they do actually eat or something. Do they have?
but all in the spirit, all in a metaphysical sense.
We'll go through more. More talking about how shadim are compared to malachim.
All in metaphysical sense, not in the.
They reproduce as well. They
Anyway.
have some kind of,
Even the highest spiritual, if you learn Zayar, you learn that even the highest spiritual realms reproduce. They have Yechudim. What are Yechudim?
yeah, but the more
Yechudim reproduction.
malachim don't reproduce, but they don't. But
But the Malachim also make Yechudim, depending on what kind and how, what you call them. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's maybe more Kabbalistic, but like more like a few percent.
Anyway, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's another-
The bottom line is Rav Yitzchak was communicating. We'll do Rashi's version here.
by
He was speaking with a demon, and this spiritual force wanted to attack him and hurt him.
Yeah.
So the Ivla Ba'arza, and miraculously he was swallowed up in a cedar tree to protect him. And then there was the next miracle was that once the threat was gone, the cedar tree spit him out. So I don't know what this means. Literally, this cedar tree opened up and took him in, or somehow the cedar tree had the capacity to protect him, or tzaddikim are referred to as cedar trees. Right, the pasuk Tehillim refers them to Arzi Alavanon, the cedar trees of Lebanon. So maybe cedar tree is a reference to spiritual energy that a tzaddik can maintain and surround himself in to protect himself against the spiritual demon. I have no idea, but this is what the story says. So there's two versions of the story. I said Rashi's version is that he was about to get attacked, and the Arza, the cedar tree, protected him and then spit him out. Another version is that the spiritual demon's attack was that he got him stuck into a tree. That's the other way of reading it. That the demon pushed him trapped him in a cedar tree, and the miracle was that the cedar tree spit him out. So I don't know what this all means.
It's the same thing with Yishai and Nevi hid in the tree, and then
So if for example, let's just go with this idea. I'm just thinking about this out loud, but let's just go with this idea that the Arza is a reference to a level of a tzaddik, right? The tzaddik and tzaddik katam yifrach ki erez balvan and yiske. The verse refers to the tzaddik as a cedar tree. So let's just say that the cedar tree is a divine spiritual energy associated with tzaddik. So you could say one version is that he went into that spiritual realm, thus protecting him against the shade. Right? And then the second miracle is that they actually was able to come back to our reality. Because a lot of times you get swallowed up in a spiritual state, you stay there. And the person doesn't come back to this world. That's correct. Which is like, Arba Nichnas Lepartis, there were 4 people who entered into the spiritual realm, and one came out fine, 3 didn't come out, or they came out but they got damaged. So the one miracle is that he was able to go into that spiritual state to protect him against the shade, and the second one is that he's able to come back to the reality. One way of thinking about this. Or if you go the other version, it's the shade pushed him into this high spiritual lofty level, hoping to make him get stuck there and not come back to this world. And the miracle was that it spit him out and sent him back to this world. Either way, you could think of it not as literally a tree swallowing him up, but in some spiritual sense. Maybe. But again, the floor is open because this is only my little reading on that. Okay, so now the Gemara gets back to, and mentioned before, that one is allowed to massage one's stomach and one's allowed to rub it with oil because, and it does not violate the issue of medicinal practice on Shabbos, because the issue of medicinal practice, as you mentioned, is primarily based on the fact that medicine is associated with grinding herbs, and here he's rubbing it on his stomach in this case, and he's massaging himself, and therefore it's more like drinking, as Rashi said, than it is like medicine. But the Gemara now gives the caveat, which I mentioned before, that besides the issue of medicinal practice, there's also the issue of memarich. Memarich is, one is not allowed to, it's a derivative of the malacha of, I don't remember what it's called in Lashon HaKodesh, but if there's in the process of preparing a hide, which is one of the 39 malachas, the 39 malachas, one goes through the process of cooking, from planting to actually baking. All the steps become a malacha, and likewise with respect to preparing an animal to eat. From shechting all the way through to cooking, again, each step is another malacha. So one of the steps in preparing an animal is, once the skin has been removed, you have to smooth it out by pulling the hairs off, right? They have an oil, and they have some combs, and they smear it. So a derivative of that is smoothing out a surface, which becomes a problem when you are For example, putting peanut butter on a sandwich becomes a problem. So the modern poskim explain, so we read from Rabbi Farkash many years ago, but I remember correctly, is that if the person is doing it and the intention is design, and that's why he's smearing it around, it's a problem. Then it's mamarech. Because the issue of mamarech here is you're smoothing it out to get a nice surface. So if a person's putting cream on a cake and he's making a fancy design on Shabbos, it's a problem. But if he's just smearing the peanut butter on the bread because he wants to cover the whole surface, not because he cares for the design, but because he wants to get the flavor everywhere, then that's fine. Because he's not here. Because over here he's not smoothing out the surface. He's just placing one item on top of another. If he's doing it with the intention of a design or the look, and that's why he's covering the cake in this cream, then here he's clearly smoothing the surface by making it look nice. Then he's a violation of a marech. But if he's just doing it simply because he wants to get the flavor over the entire surface of the bread, then it's like placing one item on top of another, and therefore it's permitted.
So
only with respect to food, not with respect to other things.
Putting the icing on the cake after Shabbos is you have to have the right intention.
That's correct. If you start making flowers and then all kind of things, you're running into a problem on Shabbos. That's correct.
Yeah, so you should just
but again,
to cover the cake.
Yes.
Not to make a design or anything.
That's right. But also to remember that this is only if you're smearing it, which means if you have a liquid one, you're just pouring it on top of the cake. It's fine.
Okay.
You're not doing any smearing at all.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have sometimes just spilled over the cake. You're just spilling it over. It's not mamarech. Yep. So here, what the issue is, you're doing this. You might be in violation of the same thing. With respect to massaging one's stomach and putting the oil on the stomach, and therefore says the Gemara, Don Rabbanan, our sages taught, Sachin, one can rub oil mamash b'shin and can massage, but b'nei me'ayim in their stomach b'Shabbos on Shabbos, but bolvad, but on condition, he shouldn't do it in the same way he does it in the weekday, and by changing in the manner in which he does it, he is taking it out of the purview of mamarech, of smoothing out on Shabbos, and it becomes an act of not smoothing, but an act of helping the stomach by changing the way the person does it. How? So hechi ovid, how should you do it? How could you make a change? You're just smearing oil on your stomach. What kind of change can you do? Bar Chanina says, Sach, you pour the oil of achach mashmish, and then you do the massaging, which apparently was the other way around. People used to first massage and then pour the oil. So he says do the other way, first pour the oil, then massage. Rabbi Yochanan says, Sach umemashmish b'vas achas. Pour the oil and massage simultaneously. I guess somebody else pours it and you massage, something like that, or maybe the reverse. And because you're doing it simultaneously, it's not the way it's ordinarily done on Shabbos, because on Shabbos, it's not the way it's ordinarily done during the week, because during the week, it's ordinarily massage first, and then oil. And here he's doing the oil and massaging simultaneously, or like Rabbi Chanina's suggestion, massaging first, oil first, and then massaging. Okay. Now the Gemara gets further with respect to the issue of incantations. Okay. Tanur Rabbanan, our sages taught Shidei Shemen v'Shidei Beitzim. Now apparently there were two ways of or there are two ways of holding oil. Right? And one is through where is it?
It's also some shade.
Yeah. No, there was some communication with demons that came through oil, and some that came through beitzim, through eggs. I think it's talking about the juice out of the egg. I don't know what it is. Yes? Give me 1 second.
Because I see some also would replace the resh with a dalet.
Yeah, but it
like some spirit parts of it.
Yeah. Yeah, demons of oil and demons of eggs.
Yeah, he replaces the resh with a dalet.
Yeah, it doesn't tell you what it is. I mean, and how you know, but anyway, the bottom line is mitar and lisha bahem. one is allowed to speak to them. You're allowed to communicate with these demons, and we're not worried about them. We're not worried about them hurting you. Apparently, they're not strong enough to hurt you. So these demons you can communicate with, but Ella, we don't, for one problem, because they lie. So don't communicate with those ones. So somehow these demons with oil and these demons with eggs, they lie. So forget those guys. But you can talk to them if you want to, because they won't hurt you. Okay.
As opposed to the other demons that are truthful.
Yeah, apparently.
And harmful. It's interesting.
And harmful.
And awful.
I think they have a placid in mind.
In other words, if they're a high enough spiritual level to get the truth out, then they're also high enough spiritual level to hurt you. But if they're too low, they can't even tell you the truth, then they can't hurt you either. Yeah. Apparently. Now, the custom was that that people would communicate with demons that are connected to oil that's in a vessel, but they wouldn't communicate with demons once the oil is in someone's hand. Now, therefore, sakin, this was the practice apparently. Therefore, sakin mishemen shebiyad, one can use without worry oil that came from someone's hand, because there's no concern that this is ever used for some negative spiritual force, because negative spiritual force aren't associated with oil in the hands. But one cannot communicate with oil that came from someone else's cup, because you don't know where this person brought it from, and if this person was communicated with demons, and maybe this oil was used to communicate with demons, and therefore there's a negative force there, don't use it. And then finally we'll conclude with the story. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta, Ikla lahu ishbiza. Rabbi Yitzchak, son of Shmuel, son of Marta, arrived at this hotel. Aisle mishra b'mana. They brought him a oil in some keli, in some vessel, and shaf, he used it to rub his face, and nafkan leit simchi ba'ape. Boil started coming onto his face.
He was contaminated.
He's contaminated by the spirit, because he took oil at a random hotel. He doesn't know who these people are, and he didn't listen to this advice of not taking oil from vessels, because some people may have used it to communicate, and these people did indeed, and therefore he got attacked by this negative spiritual force. So nafik l'shuk, he went out to the market on his way. Chazisa hi'itza, and he saw this woman, and Amra, she tells him, Zika dechamas kachazina, I see the damage of a negative spiritual force known as Hamas. Hamas.
There we go.
Yeah, the Gemara, the Torah also uses the word Hamas as a negative context. But anyway, so I see that the negative force of Hamas got to you, did something to you. Avdalei Milsa, he did something for her. He said something to him.
She did for him. Avdalei,
she did for him. Avdalei, it's Chamas kachazina hacha, comma. I see the effects of Hamas on you here. Avdalei Milsa, she did something for him, whispered something. The itzis, and he got cured. End of the story. So this is quite a wild Gemara. It's halacha mixed with.
Wow, that was the icing on the cake.
The icing on the cake. All right, a wonderful day, everybody.
I was talking with the Malach.